And the attempt to restrict what information you're allowed to see is now coming from the highest office in the land.
My hope is that Facebook, instead of taking it personally that somehow I'm saying Facebook is killing people, that they would do something about the misinformation, the outrageous misinformation about the vaccine.
You shouldn't be banned from one platform and not others for providing misinformation out there.
Here now, Pulitzer Prize-winning and independent journalist Glenn Greenwald. Glenn, the biggest shock here, I don't think it's that the modern left thinks they can, use these social media companies as their own truth squads, but that the media seems to be just like whistling past the graveyard on this. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the model was set when just weeks before the election, the Silicon Valley giants united to ban reporting done by the New York Post on authentic documents about the Biden family, and the media didn't raise any concerns. In fact, they supported it, and that sent the signal that the Biden administration, once they're in power, could use that model of suppressing information off of the internet with very little objection from the people who are supposed to defend free expression. And the thing that's so amazing, Laura, is even if you're somebody who isn't incredibly disturbed by the idea that the government is instructing social media companies what should and shouldn't be allowed to be on the internet, these are the people least competent to judge what is misinformation. They're the ones who spent a year saying that the theory of a COVID lab leak in Wuhan was a crazy conspiracy theory, and now they say it's highly plausible. Worse, these are the same people who flooded the country for 5 years with deranged conspiracy theories that Putin and the Russians had taken control over the U.S. through clandestine sexual blackmail, and now suddenly they want to act like we should trust them to determine what is true and what is false. It's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, like they haven't been operating a Bureau of Disinformation on a multitude of issues, as I pointed out in the angle. Again, when NPR, Glenn, writes an article about Ben Shapiro's site, the Daily Wire, in this thing they quoted Jamie Settle, director of the Social Networks and Political Psychology Lab at William & Mary, and she said that they tend to not provide very much context for the information they're providing. If you've stripped enough context away, any piece of truth can become a piece of misinformation. Glenn, you can see where this is going.
Yeah, I think, the reality of what's going on is that these media outlets are losing their audience. Trump was kind of like a 4-year sugar high for them. He saved their jobs. And with him gone, their audience is collapsing. There's data today showing that The Atlantic, the New York Times, the Guardian, Huffington Post have all lost between a third and half of their audience in the last year alone. Obviously, the other two cable networks combined don't get anywhere near the audience of this network. And so they look at Ben Shapiro and other right-wing voices, and they're angry that more people want to listen to them than to these corporate media outlets. And so their only option, instead of looking in the mirror and asking why people don't want to listen to them, is to try and just silence everybody so that they maintain their monopoly over the discourse, and everyone is captive to listen to them because everyone else has been silenced. That's really all it's about.
I want to get back to a point that I had made a few minutes ago. How do the Democrats, let's say it's mostly happening right now on the Democrat side, how do they think it's actually going to help them? It's like none of these questions, whether it's about kids and masks or any of these questions, they're not going to go away, right? So next year in the midterms, the questions are still going to be out there, and it's better to run themselves through the paces of tough interviews, fair interviews, just questions. But instead, when you ask a question, or you raise a point, a data point, then you're a vaccine denier. You're anti-science. You have to be stopped. It's disinformation. I have never seen anything like this since I lived in the Soviet Union as a student in the 1980s, Glenn.
It's the same mentality. I think it goes back to the 2016 campaign when they were not only so sure that Hillary Clinton was going to defeat Donald Trump, but believed they had some kind of like divine entitlement for Hillary Clinton to become president. And when they lost fair and square, they started asking themselves, why did we lose? And instead of looking in the mirror again, they started blaming everybody except themselves. And especially they started blaming Facebook, saying you allowed all this disinformation, you allowed lies about Hillary Clinton. And our only option to survive politically is to control the means of communication that we no longer control, which is the internet. That was the whole point of the internet, was to liberate us from not having to be manipulated and controlled by centralized authority. And when they saw that allowing that freedom jeopardizes their political interests, the only conclusion that they reached was, we can't allow that anymore. We can't allow this freedom. We need to control it. We need to silence it. We need to censor it. And through the Trump years, it just escalated. And they're like this authoritarian faction now that genuinely believes that censorship is in the public good.
Yeah, it is. Glenn, we're going to keep tracking it. Thank you. Great to see you tonight.